Welcome to week 7, PowerPoint 7. Crazy, almost midpoint of the course already. Stay alert, stay live, right? Cool. So for week 7 then, this PowerPoint lecture 7, we're going to break it into 3 parts. We'll take in the first part, this Byzantine Empire. That's that former Eastern Roman Empire that's going to create this new, cool, unique empire known as the Byzantines. And we're going to spend a little time talking about Islam and Christianity as well. So let's start with the Byzantines. You may recall at the end of Rome we talked about Emperor Constantine and that concept of Caesaropapism, where Constantine had gathered all civil or secular power to himself. At the same time, he grabbed and garnered all religious or sacred power to himself. So sacred, secular power all in one person. That's Caesaropapism. That's Constantine the Great. Constantine will move the capital to Constantinople, and that will be the heart of this new Byzantine Empire. When you say, well, all right, this is Eastern Roman Empire, but why is it Byzantine if this is Rome? Well, you have to understand that geography matters. And Constantinople, as you can see on this map, is right in the heart of what? The Greek world. In fact, this is Alexander the Great's late stomping grounds. So the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantine Empire, is really going to be more Hellenistic in nature, more Greek in nature. They will embrace, especially Constantine, embrace this concept of Christianity. It will become an Orthodox religion, Greek Orthodox Christianity. And it's going to replace the Latin from Rome, the culture from Rome that was the Italian peninsula, and the polytheism that was the underpinning sort of spirituality oracles at all associated with the Western Roman world. So the Byzantines are going to be very, very different culturally. While it's never a fun exercise to have to cherry pick specific leaders or rulers from these great civilizations, because there were many, and some pretty bad too, but anytime we're going to talk about ancient Byzantium, the Byzantines, next to Constantine, you have to also talk about this cat, Justinian. You just do. Not only is he remembered by historians as being the last Roman, partly because he's among the last to speak Latin, but also because he's among the last to look to fully reconstitute the former Roman Empire. If you recall, the Roman Empire would control all lands all the way around the Mediterranean Sea. This is why in the ancient world they referred to it as the Roman Lake. Well, Justinian would like this to be a Byzantine lake. Aside from that, he's going to commission ridiculously cool, elaborate engineering projects, the Hagia Sophia and others. We'll talk about those in a minute. And most specifically, he's remembered for the law codes that he's going to institute here, known as Code Justinian or Justinian's Code. Among the most impressive of all engineering projects Justinian commissions is this Hagia Sophia. Beyond the fact that it's going to be the world's largest building at the time, so an engineering feat in its own right, for 1,000 years, this is going to be the world's largest cathedral. So from roughly about 537 until the 1500s, this is going to be the world's largest cathedral. Absolutely impressive. And for those that are interested, I would recommend that you Google it, research it a little more. Pretty cool to be sure. Now, if you look at the picture of the Hagia Sophia to the right there, you'll notice there's some changes, architectural changes. When we get to Islam and we get to this Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Empire will replace the Byzantines. We'll talk about the Ottomans later. We'll talk about why those pillars are there. In fact, in an upcoming lecture lesson, we'll talk about the 5 pillars of Islam represented in that Hagia Sophia and the architectural change. While perhaps hard to conceive that there's something even greater to associate with Justinian's name than the Hagia Sophia, there is. It's the law, Justinian's Code. Over roughly about a handful of years, Justinian is going to look at the existing law codes, recodify them, in some ways go line by line through this stuff and say, all right, what's pertinent, what isn't, and if it's not pertinent anymore, get rid of it. And the whole basis here was to create a system whereby all individuals were governed by an established rule of law. Now, what Justinian will find over time is that additional laws are going to need to be added and created, but the goal here was to create a single code that everybody could work from. and it is still remembered today as one of the lasting and most impactful achievements of the Byzantine Empire because it helped bring about order and a sense of equality in some ways. With order in mind, I would be fully remiss if I didn't at least take a few minutes to talk about this Byzantine system and also the famed walls of Thessaloniki as well. So let's start with the Byzantine system first. The Byzantine system is a very elaborate governmental bureaucracy that's going to be established here. What's interesting about the Byzantine system is it's not just designed for the heads of state or head of state to maintain control, but that it's an adaptation of different civilizations and different aspects of civilizations that we've already talked about that these folks would have known about as well. They're going to be part Roman, part Persian, part Egyptian, and all together create this real elaborate structured system that's going to maintain order. Rather than talk about each of the 4 select points listed here underneath the Byzantine system on this slide, clearly points 2 and 4 relate to civilizations we've bumped into already. Point 4 with Rome, point 2 with Egypt and Persia, where we did see provincial governors appointed. The Byzantines will adapt those same types of designs and systems into their system here. But I want to focus specifically on points 1 and 3 here because it'll be a little bit more unique to the Byzantines, although point 1 we could also see happening in China earlier and later as well. Because of the hereditary nature of rule in the Byzantine Empire, it was deemed necessary that those that would be closest to the emperor, and maybe more specifically his wife, that those individuals would be eunuchs. Now, for those that are looking for a definition of eunuch, you can go ahead and Google that all day, all right? I'm getting ready to have my lunch. I don't necessarily like talking about dudes having some of the family jewels taken off of them, so to speak, all right? Doesn't matter how much federal money they'd be willing to offer me. I don't know if I'm parting with those mechanics of nature, shall we say. But we might understand or recognize, jokes aside, why you would want to have castrated individuals part of the inner circle. If the rule is by hereditary nature, you don't want one of your gentleman friends getting a little hanky-panky-esque with your wife, right? Because this is hereditary rule. Therefore, those closest to the emperor, snip, snip, chop, chop, all right? Eunuchs aside, and man, I got to move on from that. This is painful. I want to talk about point 3 here because it is important as it relates to the Byzantine system. The Byzantines called for an elaborate system of spies. This is, call it the FBI, call it the KGB, whatever. These were individuals under the employ of the state to go and spy on other individuals to make sure they're doing their job and that they are living the way they're supposed to be living and conducting affairs appropriately. If not, guess what? Goodbye. So pretty impactful, the creation and use of this system of spies. We'll see this later when we talk about other civilizations, especially the reemergence of Europe, and talk about this guy named Charlemagne. To summarize briefly on the Byzantine system, it was an elaborate governmental bureaucracy, as mentioned, that really was established to maintain control and order. And it'll be very, very successful. And in fact, it'll serve as a blueprint for others that come after them. Now, before moving on next to Belisarius, this great military leader of Justinian's, and closing out this discussion on the Byzantines, I wanted to talk real briefly about these famed walls of Thessaloniki, simply because of the engineering and design that was built into them. It's really pretty cool. If you notice in the photo here, there are several series of lines in a lighter color, almost a red. Those are bands of brick. The question becomes, well, why in the blue blazes would these guys put bands of brick between different composite materials? I mean, aesthetically, maybe it looks kind of cool, but is there a functional purpose to that? The answer is yes. Because brick was more brittle, more flexible than the harder composite materials around it, it allowed for some movement. This is a region where plate tectonics, where earthquakes are omnipresent. Therefore, they visited these cities quite frequently. One of the ways to save from having to rebuild an entire wall is to allow for what? The destruction of a part of the wall. The shaking that goes on might break off at one of these bands of brick. And yes, you'll have to replace that area above where that band of brick was, but you won't have to replace the entire wall. So there's a functional purpose to this as well as a sort of artistic or aesthetic one. Pretty cool, at least to me anyway. As we begin to wind down this lecture on the Byzantines, I had to briefly mention Flavius Belisarius as well. This is quite literally Justinian's right-hand man. If you look at the picture in the upper right-hand corner on this slide, the individual depicted to Justinian's right, Justinian is at the center, is Belisarius. Quite what? Reflective of one's right-hand man, one's strength. That's one that's on the right-hand side. It's a position of power. It's an honored position. Belisarius is there, and for good reason. If you look at the map in the bottom left-hand of the corner of this PowerPoint, you can see what? He's added quite a bit of territory. In fact, he almost doubles the size of the Byzantine Empire. Rather than go into greater detail as it relates to Belisarius, because there's a whole back history there, which is kind of interesting too for those that might want to research that further, I wanted you to look at the armor on the bottom right-hand corner of this screen. Now, I don't expect everybody to be ancient historian experts in armor, right? But what is something that's worth noting here is the design of the armor. This is a unique mix of both Persian armor and Greek armor. So it's a reflection of this Hellenistic culture, this Hellenism that occurred in the wake of Alexander the Great, what will be carried forward by the Byzantines themselves. The armor, therefore, at least on a micro scale, can give us an indication of the underpinning geography that will help establish the underpinning culture of the Byzantine Empire. This is decidedly more Greek than it is Latin, and it's important to remember that. Now, as we get ready to move into Islam next, there's one aspect that I would like you to look at or consider as it relates to this map as well. I mentioned at the outset that Constantine had made Christianity the orthodox religion in this empire. As Islam emerges in the 600s with the rise of Muhammad, what's the problem with that as it relates to this map? You guessed it. It's going to be in the southern region of this map of the empire, stretching all across North Africa into the Maghreb, as we call it today. The Byzantine Empire will therefore have to figure out how to deal with the spiritual differences that are the Orthodox Christianity, the established religion, and this emerging new faith to the south. So we'll turn to Islam next, part 2 of 3 parts in lecture 7 here. Dr. JC out from the Byzantine world. We head to Islam next.